Hello and welcome to Better Business Podcast. My name is Alexi. As always, bring you interesting guests and interesting topics. So today I've got Sally A. Curtis with us. How you going there, Sally?
Really great, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Sally runs a business called Monetize Your Content, and obviously there's many different angles as to how you can monetize and use your content. I think Sally is quite different from many other businesses I've come across. But look, I won't steal it from her. Sally, tell us about your business. Tell us about how you help other business owners.
Yes, certainly. So, as you said, we're a done-for-you marketing agency, and we work with you to help you create content so you're easy to consume and easy to buy. So effectively, we work with people that have got lots of content and don't know what to do with it, and they want to be able to share that wisdom with the world. So what we've become best known for is turning books into 2 years worth of graphic social media posts. I think saying it that way makes it easy for people to understand, because they can understand taking a book and turning it into social media assets, etc. So effectively, we really are there to help the authors, the coaches and the consultants and the speakers that want to share their wisdom with the world. Often they do that through either webinars or filling events or challenges, etc., or through their books and their educational elements. So what we do is we take that long form content in all of those different types of forms, and we turn it into short bite-sized visual graphics and or video snippets, because we believe when you're easy to consume, you add lots of value and you give people those takeaways that give them those little aha moments or trip them up and make them think about something, that you give them that forward movement, then you become very, very easy to consume. When you're easy to consume on somebody's worst day, you eventually become easy to buy. Now, I say eventually become easy to buy because in that process, we actually find that you become highly referable, and everyone's sort of talking about you and sharing your insights and wisdoms with their friends. And they purchase actually after they've done the referring. So it's a great way to increase your visibility, but more importantly, your value out in the marketplace.
Great. Well, look, that sounds like a very refined service, and surely it's taken you a while to get to that point. Would you mind telling us your story as to how you got into all this? Because I'm sure, to come up with something so specific, you must have been sort of playing in this space for quite some time. So how did you get into all this?
Yeah, very much so. So I've been playing in the, I'm going to call it the wisdom or the knowledge, personal and professional development space for over 20 years. Started as a seminar junkie, attending all the seminars, then became a crew member, so helping and volunteering at events. Then eventually found myself at the front of the room and became a speaker and started to run lots of my own workshops very successfully. Didn't realize it was hard for lots of other people. I was just doing my thing. I didn't actually even know at the time what my thing was. I just did it. And prior to that, I'd actually helped lots of our leading Australian speakers fill their rooms. So I was just duplicating what I'd done for them. But again, I hadn't actually looked back to look forward as to what I was actually doing. I was just doing it. So through that process, I started then actually helping and coaching other people to fill events. And I got to the point where I found my speaker community had hit a bit of a threshold in that they were getting fatigued and frustrated because they were taught to, write an article every week, do a newsletter, do an e-news, write a book every year. So I was getting them when they were hitting fatigue and frustration. So me being me and having a slight bossy streak, I said, oh, for God's sakes, give me your content. And I was turning it into bite-sized content. However, the reason I discovered this bite-sized scenario goes back a little bit in the backstory. Sometimes I'm a little bit slow to pick things up. And one of my coaches at the time was Dwayne Alley, and he said to me, for God's sake, Sally, you've got enough content to write 6 books. And I looked at him and thought he was mad, because clearly I could talk with marbles in my mouth underwater, but writing was not my thing. But what we did through working with some of his team at the time, which was prior to me discovering what I do now, was we turned a 45-minute presentation and the training manual that went with it into 2 100-page books. So at the time I was excited because I thought I'd become an author. Didn't think anything of it for another 8 years until I started seeing my speaker and author buddies in that fatigue space. And that was where I said, for God's sakes, give me a book and let me turn it into something. I just did that for fun because I had a coaching business prior to that. By the time you get asked 3 times, Sally, can you do this for me? Or somebody would refer me in, Sally, can you do that for me? I sort of went, oh, this is a thing. So I've always had the opportunity to fall into opportunities because I've seen a problem and I've solved a problem or I filled a gap. So it wasn't a strategic move. It was I fell into it and people kept asking me for it. And I just was clever enough to go, hey, this actually could be a thing. And it did become a thing. And the tagline of, we turn a book into 2 years worth of content came from a client who said, we did some work with his book and some videos, and he rubbed his hands together and he went, woohoo, we've just created 2 years worth of content. And I went, oh, wow, cool. That's a really great tagline. So my effortlessness and my cleverness has always come from other people's fresh insights.
Well, that's awesome. It sounds like you're really good at reflecting on a few things, but I often find this quite interesting that someone has got enough information and knowledge to write a book, and then from there they don't really realize how to use bits and pieces in terms of social media. I mean, it sort of makes sense from one perspective, but you'd expect an author to be really good in a sort of space. But then I think naturally people really zoom in too much, so that there's obviously like a reason, or as some people like to say, there's a game behind the game when people write books or potentially do courses and stuff, and they're so zoomed into it, so they don't sometimes see or really struggle to sort of zoom out. So, I mean, with this particular approach, do you find there is a particular pattern as to where people get stuck? Let's say business coach wrote a book. Where are they stuck? I mean, is it really more the overwhelm, or is it not knowing what to do in terms of approaching the whole content game?
Probably, there's probably 3 things. There's, yep, overwhelmed, don't know where to start. I'm clueless. I've written the book. That I find people, and one of my coaches also said to me, Sally, the money's in the boring. So if you use that scenario, the money's in the boring. Someone's written a book, they've done their thing, they're bored with it now. They don't want to look at it. They're on to the next bright, shiny thing. They're on to the next adventure. Somebody like me helps them look at what they've created because I'm not bored with it. It's new and it's insightful for me. And the fact that it's new and insightful for me means that it's also potentially new and insightful for either your existing community, your existing client base, or a potential new client base. So I think people just don't know. They've been there, they've done it, they're sick of it. So they often don't want to look at it, and they don't know how to look at it to be able to repurpose it.
Mm.
The audience or the clients that are probably new, so it's their first book that they've written a book because they've got their signature presentation and they've got that, the one thing that they're taking to market, is a slightly different scenario. They're actually fearful of giving their best stuff away because they've got the book and the signature program, and they think if they give stuff away, that they're going to devalue what they've actually already written because that's the one thing that they've got to sell. The reality of it is, if you can demonstrate the value and share those little tips and choreograph and attract and engage people to come on that journey with you, it actually increases the value. So I would always challenge people, don't be frightened of giving your best stuff away. If you actually do that more, it actually enables you to unpack more of your inner genius and find all of the other levels within that one thing that you've created.
Mm. Well, oftentimes it's the content that gets people to think is really what gets people to inquire with coaches and so on, because they see the practical use of a particular, method, or basically a thought that basically translates into a result. I find that, typically books represent a coaching program or a journey or something like that. It really allows the readers to connect with those, specialists. I mean, if we talk about, let's say, Brian Tracy, for example, his books are pretty much giveaway of his courses. You could really listen to a book or read a book and it's all there. But then I guess you really don't get a chance to ask a question. And if you sort of go to another degree, a book is really a monologue, right? So the author basically unpacks information, but you don't get a chance to ask a question or engage. And sometimes I think what I've seen is people really struggle to connect their own situation to what the actual business coach is potentially suggesting or teaching. So yeah, I think repurposing content is a great way to potentially tap into different markets and then create marketing materials to then fill events and do all sorts of things as well. Okay, so I understand how this works for obviously coaches and authors and so on. What about small business owners, someone who may be thinking, "Hey, I'm really good at this. I'm not sure about a book. Maybe sometime later." But how could they potentially be applying your approach or parts of your approach in order to fill their social media or web presence? Because with my web development background, I often find that the biggest problem for customers is content. Like, hey, we can write it, but we either don't have the time or we don't know exactly what to write. So what advice do you have for small business owners when it comes to content?
Yep. So if they're struggling to write content, then I would suggest speaking it. I've always got post-it notes and a post-it note and a recording device somewhere, because you can guarantee you're going to have that epiphany about something you need to share with somebody when you're in the car, etc. So capturing those sorts of things. One of the other elements I find also is that, and this is going to sound a bit weird, but this keeping in mind I've got a very strong rebel, and I've got a very bossy personality, but people get it when I say it this way. If you're struggling to write content for yourself or speak it or record it, we've all got that soapbox or that rant when somebody does something and we just want to say, "You're a wally, that's not right, you've done it wrong," that you've done it wrong scenario. If you have to start from a bossy tell somebody off space to get into an inspired state of finding and creating some content, I find when people get stuck, they're trying to be too clever, they're trying to share too much, share their wisdom, and they're not quite ready to be able to write that with ease. But we can all tell somebody off with ease. So if you need to start by telling somebody off, or all the things that they should be doing instead of, start from that space, because not necessarily putting it out as content as such, but starting that in that space will actually give you the insights of what your audience actually really need, because that's an easier space for us to be in versus trying to do it the other way around. So that worked for me because I've got a bossy streak, and I find that having done that with other clients, it just releases the shackles of them trying to be too clever too soon.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Another topic I wanted to touch on is virtual assistants. You and I had a brief conversation about this. I think too often I do hear about someone saying, "Hey, I got a virtual assistant to help me with my social media," and then a couple of months later, it's like, "Hey, it hasn't really worked out." So, can you just help us sort of unpack as to why that could be the case, and potentially if there's something missing working with virtual assistants, when it comes to content, social media, and so on?
Yep, definitely. So I'm going to use myself as an example here, and this is a common example that I see with clients, etc. When I finally got to the point that I was going to put on a VA for the very first time in my business, which was probably about 15 years ago, so it was a very, very long time, I thought I could hire somebody and they would just be able to do it for me, which is what everybody else generally thinks. So I wanted that scenario where I'd go, "Great, you're hired, brain transplant, good, go off and do it." I didn't realize, and it's very, very naively, and we don't know what we don't know. But when you hire a VA, you actually do have to slow down. And in some cases, you have to stop a little while, because you do need to be able to train them and give them insights. So if you don't have a methodology in the way that you already do something, then you're sort of even starting further back down the track. So I believe and talk to clients about, you need to be able to replicate and duplicate yourself. You replicate yourself by having very simple systems and understanding what you do, and you duplicate yourself by making sure those systems are robust enough that somebody else can follow them with very little instruction. Getting to that point takes a little bit of maneuvering, and most people haven't realized and aren't prepared to slow or stop or slow down enough to either create that opportunity for themselves to be able to pass it over to somebody. Brain transplants, unfortunately, aren't possible. I've tried.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, I do find that there's obviously many different types of VAs, and I guess there are many different problems that come up as well. First of all, yeah, training a VA is a great tip. And if anyone is thinking about getting a VA, I think you have to be super clear about what their role is. Secondly, if it's just about filling the gaps and potentially getting someone to follow simple processes, I think that may work. Picking up the phone, getting inquiries or potentially booking appointments, fine. Although obviously it can be as difficult as the business is. But I also find that when it comes to content and marketing specifically, you really need a strategy. And this is where a lot of the time getting someone for, $10 or $15 isn't really going to cut it, because essentially that person may be very good at posting or knowing the system, but they may not be very good with the actual strategy side of things. And typically it's the strategy that adds the value to get the outcome. I mean, and this goes for all the marketing, not just content. I mean, whether you're trying to do Google Ads, SEO, or whatever else, I think there's a real need for clear strategy and goals defined as well. But look, this is a whole other conversation that we may have another day.
Yes.
Okay, well, look, you've got a podcast. I wanted to pick your brains on your podcast because obviously I've been running mine for about a year. Your podcast is called Success Secrets Exposed, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us about your podcast. What sort of guests do you get on that, and what's the angle?
Yep, absolutely. So, yes, Success Secrets Exposed has been running for just over 3 years, and it's an interview scenario similar to what we've been doing today. And I interview people around their backstory, the common problems that they see in the marketplace, some tips to help my audience have forward movement, because I'm all about that forward movement, as well as providing free resources out to the audience. So, it's really been a deep dive into the personal challenge and success behind success, because I think it's so many people see the success and all the beautiful things that happen and all, but they don't understand the challenges that go into that. So we sort of focus on the, what's the backstory, what have you overcome to be here. As a result of doing that for the last few years, we've had a variety of different speakers and guests on. Many have written books. Some have had their books turned into Netflix series. And I've got some significant things coming in place. Not all are speakers with programs, but they're just change makers or disruptors. And as a result of that sort of underlying theme that started to come out, we decided that this year we would do a series called Legacy Leavers, those that are really making an impact for the greater good of everybody.
Great, great. And from what I understand, you work with obviously the Australian and the US markets. Is that correct?
Predominantly, yes.
Okay. So how different are these markets in in the space of, I guess, coaching and authors? Do you find that Australian business coaches are very different from the US coaches? I mean, what's the mindset and the struggles like? Do you find that it's all very similar, or can you sort of point out a few differences?
Yeah, I think it's similar. I do find that the volume and capacity and the speed is different in the US. Much faster, much more content, that the type of thing. So I'll just quantify that. So um, from a speed perspective, it's one meeting and yep, just get that done for me. And yes, I'll have the maximum amount of content or product that you can create for me. So they're very much fast paced, get as much content out as we can, often because they've got very, very large communities and they're often running membership sites and those sorts of things. So they want lots of content to be able to drip feed into numerous different areas and different scenarios. So sometimes it's lead generation, sometimes it's nurturing, sometimes it's just educational in the membership sites, etc. Whereas with the Australian market, I find it's probably a few years behind in that they've got their solid business, they've got their thing that they do, and they just want to keep the momentum going. So it's more of that consistency. Often we sit just underneath a person's marketing department, so come in as a support as we're needing. So we create the content, support what we need to support, and then jump back out a while. So here in Australia, we sort of tend to jump in and jump out, jump in and jump out, whereas the US market, it's jump in for a longer period of time, do a whole lot, and then just jump out for a much shorter space and then jump back in again. I also do find, and this is now only a realization, that generally when the US market goes off the boil, so to speak, the Australian market comes back on and vice versa. So they seem to operate at different times of the year now, but I'm only just starting to see that this year.
Okay, okay. I want to sort of come back to the content for a little bit. I have spoken to quite a number of people, and people do like to say that there's a bit of a recipe when it comes down to content. Would you mind maybe sharing one of those recipes? Because I hear about things like, there's got to be a hook, and there's got to be a story, and there's got to be something else in there. Would you mind maybe sharing with our listeners some sort of a, I guess, strategy or a recipe that might potentially work for, let's say, an average business coach or someone who specializes in a particular topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to change the tack very slightly. One of the things that we've noticed over the last few years, we used to have an influence diagnostic as it related to content on our website, and we ran that for quite a number of years. We're just changing it out at the moment. But through that diagnostic, it actually highlighted the 4 different areas of content and influence and those sorts of things. And the number one missing element by far was always the educational pieces. Everybody gets so bent out of shape about on with their social media doing, I've got an event, I've got a book, buy my stuff, that promotional stuff, which in some cases can push people away if it's too much. But that tends to be what people think about content. So I would say the biggest thing from a recipe for success that you can do is make sure you're adding value added educational elements. Now, educational elements can be here's step one, step two, step three. Again, with a compelling title and, the hook and all those sorts of things. So I agree with that formula for sure. But it's the educational piece that people miss the most. So, steps, it can be a question like my friend posed to me, which was, does the word discipline excite you or terrify you? That stirs up a really great conversation. So the key thing about social media and content is when your content goes out, it is designed to create a conversation that you can take offline. And you can do that through a variety of number of ways. But the one piece that's missing most is the educational element.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for sharing that. I can certainly relate to it in the sense that, we come across a lot of people that want to build a website, and I think the website is going to solve absolutely every single problem. It's going to get them new customers, it's going to sell them, it's going to book them in. Well, in reality, it doesn't quite work like that. And I guess it all really depends on, I guess, the business and the person. But most of the time, the website provides, that education or just enough information for someone to start a conversation. So then from there, it's only fair to get an inquiry or potentially a sale that actually relates specifically to that topic. So I can definitely back that up. In terms of, failures, where do you find most, business owners are failing when it comes down to, content? I mean, we obviously covered the fact that a lot of people not sure where to start, despite the fact they may have a book already. But is there something else? Is there another, pattern where people are failing?
Yep, absolutely. Consistency.
Okay.
So I explain it this way: if you think of the roller coaster ride, so we do the woohoo! I'm like creating content. I'm excited about this. Oh, it's got too much. I'll dip it off for a while. Woohoo! I'm going to create some more content. Oh, I'm bored, stupid with this. Um, those dips, when you've actually engaged and inspired an audience to start consuming your content, they're looking for you. They're on their social media. They're looking for more information. And if you stirred them up around your particular topic or niche, and then you're suddenly not there, they're going to start listening to somebody else that's in that topic or niche. So you've got to find your consistency rhythm. Now, that consistency rhythm can be very different for different people. I've got one client that only needs to post on a Sunday at 3 o'clock because he knows his audience is on LinkedIn at that time. Some people do it 3 times a week. Some say it's 7 days a week, all the rest of it. Find your consistency rhythm for your audience and your lifestyle and stick to it, because when you disappear, they will find another expert to listen to. The idea is to not disappear, is to maintain that consistency rhythm. And if you need to start your consistency rhythm at 2 times a week, start it there and increase it. But maintain consistency. That's the biggest Sally nag I can give you.
Yeah, well, that's a great tip. I mean, I've seen way too many websites where there is, 2 blog posts from, 2003 or something like that. And you ask the business owner, like, why do you have that in there? Said, oh, we wanted to have a blog, because someone advised us that it will help us with SEO. So, well, that's the case only if you use it. I mean, there's no point having something like that if you don't use it. And I guess I've seen way too many podcasts, that, you know, that people spend a lot of time on. They create beautiful content, and then everything sort of gets dated as well. So 100%, I think consistency is the key when it comes to this educational content, and it's got to be relevant as well, right? I mean, some people you may listen to from years and years ago, and those interviews or those podcasts, you know, provide great advice with evergreen content. Other people really focus on what's trending right now, and I guess it's a part of a different strategy. But if it's not consistent, then who cares? You may only get, you know, 200 or 300 views, and then no one's ever going to look you up. So yeah, totally agree with that. Cool. All right. In terms of working with you, how would people go about, I guess, connecting with you and seeing if you know the right fit for them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a discovery session or anything that you do? Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, very much so. So, yep, very easy to find me and connect with me via LinkedIn and or my website. We do exactly what you said. We go through and have a conversation, because everything that we do is about providing content that creates a conversation. I'm very much an open book, so happy to jump on a call with somebody, walk them through the possibilities of what it is that we actually do, find out more about what they're trying to achieve, what stage they're at in their business. Is it specifically for a book launch? You know, what's the specificity of they're trying to achieve? And then we go from there. As far as our process is actually quite simple. Our clients, which is the thing that they love, they inundate us with their content, whether that is just that single book or whether that's all their content. We then go through and sort and evaluate it based on their goals and what their clients are wanting to achieve and the client outcomes that they're looking for. We then go through and create the content for them, design and choreograph the content plan for them. We support them when they're launching their content to make sure that they're still, leveraging and capitalizing on the momentum that's being built. And that's designed for them to just simply do two things: inundate us with their content and build those relationships that the contents actually help them do. So we will do all the guts in the middle. As long as they're building their relationships, they'll be growing their business.
Right. Sounds good. Well, hopefully our listeners can benefit from your tips. And look, whether you're a business coach or a small business owner wanting to produce content for your business, I think it's worth a while to have a chat to Sally to see where this takes you. I have heard a few people saying that, you know, everyone's got a book in them. So you never know. Maybe you'll end up being an author as well by speaking to Sally and understanding exactly the sort of information that you bring. Sally, before we sort of wrap up, I normally do this section when I have guests. It's called Rapid Fire. This is why I ask you, you know, fairly specific questions, but I want just a quick answer. Are you ready? Okay.
Absolutely.
So obviously you go through quite a lot of books. What's your favorite personal development book?
The One Thing.
Okay. Who's the author of that?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I can't remember.
That's okay. Let's move on to the next one. Best place for a holiday. No doubt you've traveled a bit. Where do you recommend to go for a holiday?
I love the Snowy Mountains.
Okay, beautiful. New South Wales. I haven't been there in the summer, but I hear it's really quite something. I've been there in the winter quite a few times. Okay. And you've obviously worked with quite a few business coaches and clients. So who inspired you the most?
I'm going to say Dwayne Alley, actually. After all these years, he's the one person I always come back to, one of his insights or something he said or challenged me around. Yeah, he was brave enough to just say it how it was, and I had a good relationship with him.
That's awesome. Well, that's always good to get some honest advice, especially from people that you trust, because yeah, that can really be quite life-changing. Sally, thanks very much. I think this has been great. We've touched on quite a few insights, and yeah, I love your story and your angle. Would love to get onto your podcast at some stage. And yeah, if any of our listeners want to connect with Sally, please check her website, sallyaCurtis.biz, and look her up on LinkedIn as well. Sally, thanks very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Muchly appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Well, this was the Better Business Podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure you share this with your friends, and don't forget to hit the like button, whichever platform you're on, to make sure that other people get to hear about our podcast and our guests. Thanks very much.